Hello, everyone. In this video, I'll talk about some basic terms for graphing. So this is a start of a new chapter in the book, and basically this chapter is concerned with visually representing data. So recall that there was, in the last collection of videos, there was a discussion of what to do when you need to um, conduct a poll. So first you have to get a sample, then you have to collect the measurements of the data, and then you have to analyze the data. And so part of analyzing data and communicating it is visually representing it. Um, so a lot of what we're doing at this stage is analyzing data, getting the basic statistics, and really starting with some of the visual representation of it. So Um, typically, your data is going to come in different forms, and you can assign a variable to any piece of data. So there's different kinds of data variables. There's a discrete variable, and what is meant by a discrete variable? So this means that only comes in sort of a finite number of quantities. So the data has, the variable, I should say, can take on a finite uh, number of quantities. Now, this is not quite right in that you could imagine it taking an integer value. The point is that it doesn't take, there's not a continuum of possibilities. So another way, another type of variable would be a continuous variable. And this can take on any, say, real number variable. So any decimal quantity can be taken. So maybe some examples of, say, a discrete variable. So an example uh, would be, so for discrete, you could say, well, something like test score. Let's say you have a test score. Usually you don't get, 32 plus pi as your test score or something like that. You get an integer number between 1 and maybe 100. Maybe you get a half point. Maybe there's some partial credit. You can divide it up a little bit, but it can't take any continuous variable or any continuous quantity typically. It'd be an interesting class if it could. Um, you could say sort of the number of times someone does something. So the frequency or sort of number of times an event occurs. That's a discrete variable. Um, this because it's giving you a positive integer value. On the other hand, continuous variables would look like something, or would look something like, say, the sort of the distance from an object. Because that's something that can vary continuously, or like your speed, speed in a car, which also can vary um, continuously. So these are the differences. Is sort of you can imagine something that can um, only take on a finite collection of values within any certain range, and then something that is sort of has an infinite possible number of values it can take inside of any range. That's more of a continuous variable. All right, so these are different types of variables. There's another variable type, which is called a categorical variable. So let me say these are examples of the previous two, but there's another variable type, which is categorical. And this is a discrete variable that's not, I'll say a discrete output that is not numerical. And this is something that in many, many studies is the kind of data you will get in many qualitative studies. So what are examples of this? So for example, and I'll have one in a later video talking about this. You could say you're taking a survey of someone's favorite ice cream. What's the favorite ice cream? And you give them three options. So, or you don't give them three options, you give them any options. Uh, but the response you're recording is not like, numbers one, two, three, and four and five. You're recording chocolate or vanilla or whatever um, output that you would expect there for ice cream. And you can then go on and on. You can say, well, you're recording, where were you born? So birthplace. Um, and it's true, you can code the answers numerically, but there's a sort of a categorical output here of, okay, it's a city or it's an ice cream flavor, something of that sort. So these variable types will generally affect how you want to represent um, a your data visually. And so what we'll get into some of these examples of visual representations of data in a moment in other videos, but let me just establish a little bit of vocabulary if people have been away from it for a while. So typically, well, and this is not always the case, but in several cases, if you're drawing data out visually, you'll have what are called the axes. And so you'll have a horizontal axis. And this is, if you're doing certain types of graphs, this will be called an x-axis, but sometimes it's just called the horizontal axis. And you'll have a vertical axis. And you'll have tick marks representing various things, and you'll have tick marks along the horizontal axis. And this does not have to be a graph of a function or something like that. There'll be different types of graphs that have these different axes and tick marks, um, including bar graphs, histograms, things of that sort. But what is very common is that on the x-axis, you'll have one variable. So you'll have a variable that's indicated on the x-axis, and you'll have another variable indicated on the y-axis. That usually the x-axis, sorry, the horizontal axis is an independent variable or an input, but not always. And usually this is sort of your output variable or the quantity you're guessing. But we'll look at some examples in just a moment in the next videos on what kinds of graphs you can make with different axes. All right. This video is really just to establish some of these terms and some of this vocabulary so that in the future videos we can use them. All right, great.